character.
Hello, hello. I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
And this is
Render the Darkness.
Today we're going to be talking about Alcatraz Prison. And I will say ahead of time that this is a 2-part episode because, my God, the history of this place.
I can imagine.
I did not know what I was diving into. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know a whole lot about it, and now I do. So, yay. Okay. The fact for this episode is that it is believed that Alexander the Great may have accidentally been buried alive due to him being paralyzed by a disease that didn't allow him to speak or move.
That is terrifying.
It is terrifying. I read that his body didn't decay for 6 days after he was buried, so that just kind of like scientifically suggests that he wasn't actually dead when he was buried.
Oh.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say scientifically it's been proven to be true.
So I'm guessing then they didn't have those little bells that they used to have. Like they used to put the caskets.
Oh, yeah, the death bells.
So yeah, where you just ring it.
Well, and even if they did, if he was paralyzed by a disease, he wouldn't have been able to.
Well, maybe he got unparalyzed.
Maybe.
It was just, it could have been there, just in case.
Just in case. Okay, so today's episode is not only interesting, but it's also kind of a 2-for-1 because it contains a little bit of true crime, a little bit of history, and some paranormal.
Ooh, ghosties.
Yeah, just a ton of information on this one. So we're going to dive right into it.
All right.
Alcatraz Prison, also sometimes, quit pushing on my back, also sometimes called The Rock, is located on Alcatraz Island, located a little over a mile off the coast of the San Francisco Bay in California. The island was discovered in 1775 by Juan Manuel de Ayala. Messed that up completely. Anyway, who was a Spanish explorer. I believe he's also, he's credited for discovering the Bay of San Francisco and 2 other islands located off of it other than Alcatraz Island, because he's the one who officially mapped it.
Oh, nice.
So him being credited for it, it doesn't necessarily mean he was the first one there.
Right.
It just means he's the one who put it on the map.
He's the one that recorded it.
Correct. In 1850, the California gold rush was causing a quick rise in population in San Francisco. So to protect the bay, a presidential order was put in place to allow the U.S. military to acquire the island, and they quickly built what kept being referred to as a fortress on the top of the island. They installed 100 cannons around the island and created what was called the Triangle of Defense when they joined forces with the Fort Point and Lime Point to protect the entrance of the bay.
Nice.
Little known fact, or at least I didn't know this, so I guess I should say interesting fact, but they also erected the first ever operational lighthouse on the West Coast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It didn't take long for military prisons to begin to be established there. They began building those in late 1850. By 1909, the military no longer felt the need for such heavy defense, so they tore down their fortress, leaving just the prisons and the basement, which was left with the goal of building a new prison.
Okay.
Starting in some sources say 1910 and other sources say 1911, the military began building their prisons. It took 2 years, so that would be, depending on what source you go with, 1911 or 1912. It was designated to be the U.S. disciplinary barracks for the U.S. Army called the Pacific Branch.
All right.
In 1933, the United States Department of Justice gained ownership of the Pacific Branch to be used by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The goal here by the federal government was to show citizens that they were serious about stopping the high level of crime that was happening at the time. To do this, they opened a maximum security, low privilege penitentiary. When building the prison, they made sure to modernize it. The main cell house was 3 stories. It had 4 blocks that were labeled A block, B block, C block, and D block. It also housed the warden's office, a barber room, a library, and a visitor room. The cells were 9 by 5 feet in width and length and 7 feet high. The cells consisted of a bed, desk, wash basin, and toilet. The D block was considered the scariest block because it's where the worst inmates were taken. This block had the isolation cells, often I think now referred to as solitary confinement cells.
Okay.
There were 6 of them that were often referred to as the hole. Basically, if someone was misbehaving, they were put in the hole for an extended period of time away from all the other prisoners, and they were completely confined to those cells for however long they were sentenced to be in there. If I read it correctly, it was called that because everything was removed from the cell but a mattress, including the toilet, and the only thing they were left with was a hole to use the bathroom in.
Ew.
The cafeteria, or I think I read it was called a dining hall, or I think it's called a mess hall.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the kitchen were off the main building, and the hospital was located right above the cafeteria. The corridors were named after most popular U.S. streets at the time.
Oh, okay.
The prison could hold up to 336 prisoners at a time, but maintained an average of around 250 to 275. I think I read somewhere that the prison was never, ever actually full.
Okay.
The treatment of the inmates was said to be pretty rough at times because it was designed to not only house the worst of the worst, but it was also designed to break those criminals so they could be reformed.
Okay.
I read they would perform some pretty harsh disciplines there on a physical basis, like on a physical level and also a psychological level. Surprisingly, though, despite that reputation, some of the prisoners of Alcatraz were reported as saying that this prison was better than many other federal prisons at the time.
Oh, wow.
I think that's mostly in part to the fact that there was only 1 inmate per cell.
Yeah, that would probably do it.
It heavily reduced on, the chances of sexual assault, physical assault.
Shankings.
It allowed more privacy, even though the cells were open. You still, with it being such a small cell, it still gave you a certain level of comfort, security, and privacy.
Yeah, you could use like a newspaper or drag your mattress over to the toilet.
Yeah. It was your space. You had your own space, which is not something a lot of people get in prison, from what I understand.
Yeah.
The structure of the prison was intended to teach its inmates how to follow the rules. They were put on a strict regimen of the exact same routine every day. When a prisoner would arrive at Alcatraz, he was only given 4 basic human rights, and that was food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Any other rights they had to earn. For example, inmates were able to earn the privilege of working. If they did earn this right, they would typically do so in the Model Industry Building and the New Industries Building, where they were assigned jobs such as laundry, sewing, or woodworking. And most of the jobs they were assigned were to benefit the military.
Oh.
Once the prison was built, this did cause an increase in security, so between the increase in that and the level of modernness the prison had, as well as the location of the prison and the conditions of the water surrounding the island, which the conditions of the water were said to be extremely strong currents and deathly cold waters. The prison operators deemed Alcatraz as escape-proof.
Right.
It didn't take long for the reputation of the prison to be sealed as America's most secure prison at the time.
Nice.
Which is why a lot of the inmates that they received there, they received because they were known for attempting to escape from other prisons. So they would be moved, if they were a flight risk, they would be moved to Alcatraz under the idea that they wouldn't be able to escape the island.
Right. Okay.
It was possible to be released from the prison if an inmate could convince the staff and the warden that they were reformed and that they could in fact follow the rules of society and were no longer a threat. Oftentimes they would be transferred to other federal prisons to finish out their sentences, but as I'm sure anyone who knows anything about Alcatraz history knows, not all prisoners were reformed, and some got to leave in completely different ways.
Ooh.
Let's talk about some of the more known prisoners of Alcatraz. Some of them we're going to talk about are, excuse me, Arthur Doc Barker and Alvis Karpis, who were well-known members of the Barkus and Karpis gang. George Machine Gun Kelly.
Ooh.
James Whitey Bulger, and none other than Al Capone.
Al Capone.
Lots of mobsters and gang members seen the walls of this place.
Sounds like it.
Another famous inmate I wanted to mention was Robert Stroud, or AKA the Birdman.
The Birdman.
Yes, ma'am. This fella here, he was originally convicted of manslaughter, which landed him in the U.S. penitentiary on McNeil Island in Washington. Unfortunately, while there, he brutally attacked another inmate. Once that happened, he was moved to a penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, where he murdered a guard.
Oh.
At that point, he was sentenced to death after being charged with first-degree murder. But, for whatever reason, in 1920, President Woodrow Wilson changed Stroud's death sentence to life in prison.
Huh. I wonder why he did
I
that.
have no idea why he did that. I tried to find it, but
Huh.
He would stay in Leavenworth until 1942 when he was transferred to Alcatraz. The reason for the transfer, you might ask?
Yes.
Well, he had become obsessed with birds at Leavenworth and even wrote a couple books about them. I think one of the books are still considered like one of the best dictionaries or informants of bird study to this day.
Oh, wow.
Thinking he was finally on a constructive path, the prison encouraged his studies, even letting him have birds and bird cages in his cell.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice of him. But one day, upon a search of his cell, they found a whole bunch of contraband that he had claimed he needed for his quote-unquote studies, that he had turned into a makeshift still, where he was making some good old home brew.
Oh, nice.
He ended up spending
Prison
17...
hooch. Sorry.
Yep, no weird. He ended up spending 17 years at Alcatraz. 6 years were spent in an isolation cell, and the remaining 11 were spent in the hospital before Alcatraz... in the hospital of Alcatraz before he was transferred to a federal prison hospital in Springfield, Missouri, where he would die in their medical center on November 21st, 1963.
Dang, he spent 11 years in the hospital?
Oh, well, yep.
Wow.
11 years. That's a long time.
It is.
As interesting as these guys undeniably were, and as well known as they weren't necessarily the only famous inmates from Alcatraz. We're going to spend a second talking about some other prisoners that wreaked havoc over their time at Alcatraz and really tested how truly inescapable it really was.
All right.
Over the years that Alcatraz prison was up and operational, which was from 1934 to 1963, it had a total of 14 attempted escapes.
14. Wow.
Yeah. I will try my best to go over these in order as they were recorded, having happened from earliest to the latest.
All right. That's cute.
The first recorded escape attempt was by an inmate by the name of Joe Bowers. While performing his job duties, which was burning trash at the incinerator, he attempted to climb over the chain-link fence that was surrounding the edge of the island. The guards tried to talk him down from the fence, but when he refused, one of the correctional officers shot him. He fell off the fence about 100 feet to the shore, where he would die from his injuries.
Oh, dang.
On December 16th, 1937, after working on this plan for quite some time, two prisoners, Ralph Rowe and Theodore Cole, escaped through a window of the Model Industries building that they had filed the bars off of.
Okay.
They actually did make it to the bay. However, the timing of this escape attempt couldn't have been worse. There was said to have been a huge storm happening at the time, and so the currents were way faster and stronger than they usually were, which were already pretty fast and strong to begin with. Although most believe they must have drowned, thinking there was just no way for them to possibly have survived such harsh water and weather conditions, or even that maybe they possibly got swept to sea. Despite that, their bodies were never recovered, and they would be two of the only 5 people to be listed on the Alcatraz missing and presumed dead list.
Okay, so there's like a slight possibility that they may have gotten out and not eaten by a shark.
Absolutely. I think they did get out. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but
all right.
On to the next attempt. This again took place in the Model Industries building on May 23rd, 1938. During this attempt, inmates Rufus Franklin, James Limerick, and Jimmy Lucas would attack an unarmed correctional officer with a hammer.
How?
The officer's name was Royal Klein, and unfortunately, he did die from his injuries.
Oh.
They then made their way to the roof, where they tried to disarm a tower officer by the name of Harold Seitz. Seitz was able to shoot Franklin and Limerick, killing Limerick and stopping the attempted escape. Franklin and Lucas's sentence was then changed to life in prison for the murder of Royal Klein. Remember earlier when I mentioned Arthur Doc Barker?
Yes, I do.
Well, he was moved to Alcatraz because he was continuously trying to escape other prisons.
All right.
Being at Alcatraz didn't really seem to detour that urge in the slightest.
Okay, you found it like a challenge.
Maybe.
Challenge accepted.
It was very much accepted, if that's what it was. It's recorded that on January 13th, 1939, Barker and fellow inmates Henry Young, William Martin, Dale Stamphill, and Rufus McCain managed to saw through the bars of their isolation cells and somehow bent the bars on the windows, which, side note, you'll hear of inmates doing that a lot throughout these attempts, which, why were the bars so easy to bend?
I don't know, but I'm wondering, like, where did they get whatever they used to saw the bars with? Like,
well, they had jobs all over. Like, they had jobs in every building. They had jobs outside. They had jobs, they even had inmates work in the docks.
So they weren't really checking them very well, I guess.
I don't know if it's that they weren't checking them or that they just weren't well supervised in general. I don't know.
Alrighty. Wonder what they used to saw through it.
I don't know, but you'd think after that happening so many times, they might think about maybe changing the material they used for the bars.
Yeah, that would probably be a good start.
Something more durable. I don't know.
Or like, when everybody leaves for the day, check every nook and cranny of their orifices to make sure they ain't got nothing, to saw bars with.
True.
But, sorry.
True. No, you're fine. Okay, back to the story. Once they were out, they attempted to flee, running to the west side of the island where they were caught. McCain and Martin peacefully surrendered, but Stamphill and Barker did not, causing both men to be shot.
Oh.
Barker would die from his injuries. Moving on to the next escape. Attempted by inmates Arnold Kyle, Lloyd Barkdahl, which awesome last name.
I like Lord.
Not his name, but yeah, it's a good one. Sam Shockley and Joe Kretzer on May 21st, 1941. They were able to take several guards hostage again in the Industries building.
What is up with this building?
I'm not victim blaming here at all, but what was going on with these industry buildings?
I don't know. They need to be watched at it a lot better.
Yeah, like in the Lucas and Franklin attempt, the officer wasn't even armed.
Right? Yeah.
That's so crazy to me. Anyway, all right, off my earphones. One of the officers they had as a hostage was Paul Madigan, who was thankfully able to convince the men that escaping was impossible, so they surrendered.
Good deal.
And fun fact, Paul Madigan would go on to become the prison warden from 1955 to 1961. So good for Paul.
Go Paul. Go Paul.
It's your birthday. It's not his birthday. Okay. Unfortunately for the prison, it wouldn't take long for another escape attempt to be made. Just 3 months after the last one on September 15th, an inmate by the name of John Bayliss would try his hand at leaving the island. He did so while working. He did so while working garbage detail. Didn't take long for him to change his mind, it would seem, because apparently he decided the water was too cold.
Don't blame him. The coldness is not fun.
Yeah, ask Eskimo Fallon back here.
Mm-hmm.
He would get brave again later, and for some insane reason, he would attempt to flee and escape a courtroom of a federal court in San Francisco.
Wow.
Needless to say, this attempt was not successful.
Oh.
Any theories as to why?
I don't know. Not at all. That's just...
Moving on to April 14th, 1943, enter yet another attempt from the Industries building where 4 inmates took 2 officers hostage and climbed out of a window, making their way to the edge of the water. The names of these 4 were Harold Brest. There's really no other way to say that last name, but just to be clear, it's spelled B-R-E-S-T. So if you know of another pronunciation, please feel free to let me know. And if I did pronounce it wrong, I apologize.
Breast.
That's definitely not the right way to say it. And with him was Fred Hunter, along with James Borman and Floyd Hamilton. The men actually did make it to the water, but whilst they were getting there, one of their hostages were able to alert another officer of the men's escape, and Hunter and Brest were apprehended. Borman, however, was shot, which caused his body to sink, never to be recovered.
Okay.
Somehow, though, Hamilton, who they presumed to have drowned, he made it to a little cave where he hid out for a couple days, but eventually he would attempt to make his way back to the Industries area where he was caught.
Oh, well.
So this guy technically did make it out. He just went back in.
Okay.
I think I would consider this the first technically successful escape.
Yeah.
Even though it was only a couple days, if he hadn't gone back, he would have been free.
Yeah.
They weren't even looking for him anymore. They thought he drowned.
Huh, I wonder why he went back.
So maybe the water was too cold.
No food.
Maybe.
Too cold. Cold.
There wasn't another attempt made until July 31st, 1945. This was actually a pretty clever attempt by the prisoner, I must say. I gotta give credit where credit is due.
Alright.
Just the universe seemed to have other plans for this guy.
Okay.
The guy was John Giles. His job assignment was working the docks, loading and unloading the military laundry the inmates were tasked with cleaning. His plan was to steal a uniform and pose as a military officer and ride the launch boat to San Francisco to freedom.
Smart.
Great plan. Unfortunately for him, his lack of presence was almost immediately noticed, and the launch boat that he got on wasn't going to San Francisco. It was actually going to Angle Island, where an officer was waiting at the dock to apprehend him and take him back to Alcatraz.
Oh.
The next attempt was dubbed the most famous of the island, so enter the Battle of Alcatraz, sometimes called the Alcatraz Blast Out. This was a 2-day event taking place from May 2nd to May 4th of 1946. 6 prisoners were able to do a complete takeover of the cell house, overpowering the officers. They were able to get their hands on the weapons in the cell house as well.
Okay.
A small, slight oversight on the inmates' part caused this whole thing to crumble. They didn't have the key they needed to open the recreation door, which was the door they needed to use to escape.
Ooh.
So, pretty big oversight, actually.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to work.
However, the inmates that orchestrated this whole thing, which was Marvin Hubbard, Sam Shockley, remember him, Myron Thompson, Bernard Coy, Joe Kretzer, old Shockley's partner in crime, I assume, since this was their second attempt together.
Yeah.
And Clarence Carnes. They decided that despite not having a real way out, they were going to fight.
That's not good. 3
of them did ultimately surrender and return to their cells. And those 3 were Shockley, Thompson, and Carnes. However, unfortunately, before they surrendered, Shockley and Thompson were somehow able to convince Kretzer to shoot the hostages.
Oh.
The hostages were Officer Williams and Officer Harold Stites, which, if you remember, Stites was the officer who shot James Limerick and Rufus Franklin in 1938. Sadly, both of these officers were killed.
Dang.
18 more officers would be injured in this attack.
Dang.
They ultimately had to call in their Marines to assist in stopping the cell house takeover, which led to a standoff between the Marines or the military and Hubbard and Coy and Kretzer, whose bodies were discovered in the cell block C unit.
Oh, dang.
Carnes would go on to receive his second life sentence, while Thompson and Shockley were executed in December of 1948 via the gas chamber at San Quentin for their roles in the deaths of Officer Miller and Officer Seitz.
Okay.
The prison would remain quiet for almost 10 years after this attack, until July 23rd, 1956. Floyd Wilson decided to try to take advantage of his job at the docks, but this one's not allowed to tell. It took a couple of hours for him to be found hiding, where he peacefully surrendered.
Oh, okay.
Another attempt by an inmate to escape was on September 29th, 1958. Yet again, 2 prisoners overpowered an officer while working outside on garbage detail. Their names were Clive Johnson and Aaron Burgett. They would actually make it in the water, which is where officers were able to catch and detain Johnson. Burgett, however, wasn't immediately found, but his body would be found floating in the bay 2 weeks after the attempt.
Oh, wow. So I wonder if he, like, got swept away and drowned, or if he was, like, out there for a little while and maybe, like, died of thirst or starved or something.
Maybe. And then came the second most famous attempt, which I might argue that this one was actually the most known, because they ended up making a movie about this one, which had Clint Eastwood in it.
Oh.
Clint Eastwood.
What was the name of it?
I have no idea. I didn't look it up. We can Google it real fast. You got your phone here.
I was going to say.
Hold on, let me Google that. I probably should have put that in there.
Okay,
so that if you wanted to go watch it.
Do some Christmas music.
Not sponsored. With Clint Eastwood. Escape from Alcatraz.
Well.
1979 film.
All right, then. That's a
they-
good name for the movie.
Why'd
All
they
right.
make it so hard to relate those two together? I should have looked that up. That's a complete botch on my part, and I apologize for that. That was just poor researching.
I'm sorry.
No, why are you sorry? That's a pretty good question that I should have had in here.
I should watch that. I don't think I've ever seen it.
I also have never seen
Well,
it.
apparently I haven't, because I'm like,
What's the name of
yeah,
it?
what's the name of
Thanks
it?
for your question, fella.
But then again, my brain my memory is not good, so I could watch something and not remember it. So,
That's true.
maybe I did see it.
Yeah, and Grandpa always watched Clint Eastwood movies, so
Yeah.
it's very possible that we seen it when we were younger and we just were too young to comprehend what it was about, so we don't remember.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
also very possible.
Sorry.
It's okay. This one happened on June 11th, 1962. There were 4 inmates involved, 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, another man named Alan West,
Alan West.
and one more. That's a very,
Alan
like, I don't know, it's like a very, what am I thinking of? Like country western movie kind of a name. Like you just see him kicking open the doors of a parlor with some guns on his hips. Anyway,
And whenever you said, I just was thinking of Adam West. Adam West.
I don't know who that is.
Continue.
And one more man named Frank Morris. These men were able to orchestrate and implement what may be the most intricate escape plan in the history of escape plans. Even though the plan was technically executed on the 11th, it wasn't discovered until the 12th while officers were performing their morning bed checks. John and Clarence Anglin and Morris had cleverly staged and crafted dummies and had them laying in their beds in their place. These dummies were made out of plaster, painted the color of their skin, and had real human hair. They were so creepy looking. I'll definitely post a link for the pics of them in the show notes because they really were creepy. They were built well enough that they apparently had tricked the night guards into thinking the men were sleeping peacefully in their beds, which I will credit the real human hair for that one.
Yep. I wonder where they kept them, like the dummies.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
We'll get into that.
Carry on.
Moving forward. Alright. Once it was discovered the dummies were not the men, an extensive search began quickly. They also put out alerts to all the boat operators in the bay, contacted relatives of all three men, and had all of their records sent over. They all had a pretty wide history of escape attempts.
Oh, go them.
And the dummies weren't the only ingenious part of the plan. Let me tell you all the things these dudes concocted over the course of the year that they were putting this together, because there was evidence that they started devising this plan the December before they actually executed it.
A whole year?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Which really, once I tell you everything they did, that's not a lot of time to pull off everything that they pulled off.
Oh, okay.
One of them had come across some old saw blades, and it's believed that this is what kind of triggered the whole plotting of the escape. They managed to get a hold of a motor from a vacuum, which they used to make a drill out of. So they were hella crafty.
Yeah, like some Inspector Gadget or...
MacGyver.
There you go.
MacGyver. Alright. They used the drill... I gotta stop saying alright. It's just like my cue word to bring myself back to... Because I'm easily... I'm a Gemini. What are you gonna do?
I was fixing to do the Matthew McConaughey thing, but I was like, better not do that.
But it would have to be the Jim Carrey version of the McConaughey thing. Have you ever seen him do it?
Yeah, I have.
Like the really over drama. Anyways.
And the Lincoln commercial.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They used the drill to start making tiny holes all around the vents that were in their cells. They did that until they were able to remove the piece of wall that was located around the vent.
Okay.
I don't know how they cloaked or hid the tiny holes before you asked while they were working on it, but I did read that they just kind of like stuffed debris, whatever they could find, pieces of cardboard, whatever, to hide them.
And the guards didn't think that was weird, just like little pieces of cardboard sticking out the wall.
I mean, I would think they would have taken the time to make sure it was smooth.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Okay, don't ask me why on this next part.
Okay.
But directly behind their cells was a completely unguarded utility room, which they used to get to the area they had set up as a workshop.
Okay.
What they would do is one of them would keep watch for guards using a homemade periscope, while the others worked on their escape items.
Okay.
They somehow managed to obtain more than 50 raincoats. They used those to make their getaway rafts and their life jacket.
Oh, dang.
Said that
they
backwards.
They are very crafty.
Used those to make their getaway raft and their life jackets.
Oh.
Plural and singular is important.
Yes.
They used the prison steam pipes to seal or sew the material together. And they made wooden paddles, and they found some kind of a musical instrument that they were able to make a tool out of that they could use to blow up the raft.
Dang, these guys were really...
Yeah. Then they mapped a route of the prison using the pipe system that it had. These pipes led to a ventilator that they would eventually pry open.
Okay.
They did this and were able to hide that the ventilator was loose by making fake bolts out of soap.
What? Dang. See, they instead of doing all this, they should, be better people, get out in society, use this stuff for good, productive things, because they seem like they are very smart.
Morris was regarded as being extremely highly intelligent.
Wow, it sounds it, man.
And West was also noted as being intelligent. I'm not so sure about the England brothers, but so I don't know how much of the orchestrating was their plan. But I do know, like I said, I did read that Morris and West were really smart.
Wow.
The plan was that all 4 men would go into the corridor, grab their getaway stuff, climb out of the ventilator, get on the roof, climb down the smokestacks of the bakery, get over the fence, and then sneak down and launch their raft off the north shore of the island.
Wait, the prison had a bakery?
It had a bakery.
Wow.
Well, you got to keep in mind, which I'll get more into how the island was set up in the second part, but you got to keep in mind that it wasn't only a prison there. Like people lived there.
Oh, okay.
Like there was because you had all of the staff who lived there.
Oh, okay.
There was like
sense.
a ward's mansion, and most of the staff had some kind of like a maid or a housekeeper that lived there that had their own houses, and so it was like a tiny little community, its own little community that was centered around the fact that it was a prison, and the main goal was to obviously secure the prison, but it wouldn't have been feasible for people to travel back and forth from
right.
Off the island to the island every day to perform, to go to work. So people lived there.
Okay, that makes sense. So, I don't know why I was thinking it was just a prison, and I wasn't thinking about what people were doing. I was just like, there's a bakery on a prison.
No, there was a bakery, but yeah, like I said, there's people who lived on the island.
All right.
The plan, however, only worked for 3 of them. West was the only one who did not have his vent grill entirely removed by the time they were ready to orchestrate the plan, so the other 3 men just left him behind.
Oh, well.
And
you had a whole year, guy. A whole year.
They had a date. They were set on doing it, and that's the date they were going to do it.
Yep.
And by all accounts, it seems their plan potentially worked. The men are actually listed to this day as missing and presumed drowned. So they are the other 3 that are on the list of the 5.
Okay.
Anyway, that's because a lot of the things were found in the water that might make somebody believe that they may not have made it. For example, 2 life vests would be recovered, strangely in 2 different areas though. One was in the bay and the other was outside the Golden Gate Bridge. Which made me think that maybe they decided to split up, that they did make it, and they just ditched the life jackets once they got to shore.
Yeah.
Anyway, the oars were found in the water. Very carefully sealed letters and pictures of the men were found floating in the water. And a few weeks after the escape, a badly decomposed body was found not far from the San Francisco coast, but the body wasn't able to be identified due to its condition. But it was wearing a blue uniform, which is what the prisoners at Alcatraz wore. So, I mean, there's evidence that they may not have made it, but what do you think? I think they made it.
I was going to say, before you said, they found a body, I was thinking, like, maybe they threw those things out there to make them think that they drowned so they wouldn't go looking for them.
Yeah.
But since you said that about the body in the blue uniform, one of them may have.
See, I personally think that at least 2 of them made it. Like, Morris was, like I said earlier, he was extremely smart, but the other 2 were brothers. So I would think that if something did go wrong, they would do everything possible to save each other. So it's also been proven multiple times. Not only is it entirely possible to make the float from the island to the shore, but it can be easily swam if conditions are right, or even if a person is fit enough or a good enough swimmer. So who's to say they didn't make it?
Well, they may have.
There was also a myth at the time that sharks surrounded the island, but it's since been proven that no man-eating sharks actually live anywhere near the San Francisco Bay. And I will say, too, that I did read that, it wasn't that long ago that there were 2 10-year-olds that made the swim.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, there was another guy who made the swim while also, I think he was pulling a raft or pulling a boat or something. He had something attached to him and he made the swim. So, it's entirely possible to make that swim if conditions are right.
Gotcha.
So, I think, personally, at least 2 of them made it. I don't know which 2, but that's my opinion.
I'm going to say that one guy probably definitely made it.
Morris?
Yeah.
Because he was so smart?
Yep.
The last and final attempt to escape was made by Daryl Parker and John Paul Scott on December 16th, 1962. They bent some of the bars on the window in the basement and made it to the water. Parker was found on some rocks not far from the island. Scott got swept out by the current of the water, but was later found near Fort Point and taken to the Presidio Army Base Hospital because he was said to be hypothermic and in shock. Once he recovered, he too was returned to Alcatraz.
Okay. Huh?
The prison would be officially closed, or at least closed as a prison, on March 21st, 1963. Apparently, this happened because it was just way too expensive to justify keeping the prison open any longer. Just for the maintenance and restoration that would have been required to keep the prison open, it would cost them an estimated $3 to $5 million. That's just the maintenance and restoration. The daily cost of running the prison was around a staggering $10 or so a day. And just to give you an idea of how expensive that is, most other federal prisons at the time cost an average of $3 a day.
Oh, dang.
The reason it cost so much is more because they weren't on land.
Right.
Which meant that everything they received, such as food, fuel, water, general supplies, that all had to be shipped by boat.
Right.
Which you hear water and you think, weren't they surrounded by water? And the answer is yes, they were, but not fresh water. Which means they had to have their fresh water boated over. I read they boated over an average of 1 million gallons of water a week.
Ooh. Well, I mean, they were doing a lot of laundry. They had that nice little bakery on the island. I'm just going to keep talking about that bakery.
You are focused on that bakery. What did they serve at that bakery?
Right.
Maybe that's my next case, part 3. The bakery of Alcatraz. So you can see why the government would eventually deem it no longer feasible to keep it open, and so it closed.
Right, okay.
That wouldn't, however, be the last time people would hear about Alcatraz, though, which is where I'm going to stop this episode, and we'll continue into part 2, where we will talk about the occupation of Alcatraz that began in 1969 and what led up to that, and also the suspected ghosts that are known to be residing on the island. Ghost Stories, part 2. Come back for the ghost of Alcatraz. It's not all it's about, but it's a lot of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the first part of my story about Alcatraz prison.
Awesome. That was really good.
And this is normally the part where I would say if I left anything out or if you know anything different, let me know, which still do that, but also kind of wait till part 2 so you can see what I do actually leave out and what I do actually include, because I do include a lot more of the history behind the island in part 2. And so yeah,
ghosties.
Part 1, get ready for some ghosts on part 2. I'm just gonna stop singing, and I'm sorry to do that to you. Welcome back, Dr. Seuss. As always, thank you guys so much for spending time with us.
Yes, thank you so much.
We hope that you will come back and join us again.
Yes, thank you.
And for all of you who are supporting us, we really appreciate it. And as always, we can be heard on all of your favorite podcast channels, and we can be seen on YouTube.
Also, if you didn't catch our
live
that
we did with Ryan Jones and Dennis Eslock about the cabin on 360, we have posted that video also on just about every social media site you can think of.
Watch it. It's
please
so
watch
cool.
it. It's so rad, and you get so much information, and these guys just knew a whole lot, and they were really awesome.
Yeah, if you like paranormal, if you want to try to catch something, go rent the cabin.
Or if you want to support preservation of history and land, and just please check it out. Like the Cabin of 360. So they have a website. It's really interesting, super cool.
Yeah, and my mom went blank. The podcast. It's called...
Oh, yes. Ryan Jones also hosts a podcast called The Freaking Awesome Paranormal Show. I've listened to a little bit of that. And also,
it's pretty cool.
Very awesome. So check that out too if you have a little extra time and you're looking for another podcast to listen to. So shout out to those guys for being so great and really awesome first guests.
Yeah, first guests. And hey, you know, if you want to come on,
you got a story to tell, ghost story, true crime story, something that's important to you, folklore, myth, legend, cryptids, whatever.
About your little black kitty cat up a tree.
Yeah, just reach out, give us an email, comment, whatever.
If you just want to come on and say hi.
Absolutely. Well, I will do a whole episode of listeners just saying hi. I don't care.
Hey.
But yeah.
Next caller. Hi.
Look forward to hearing from you. So, yeah.
I have a little phone set up. Just, you know, so you just see the lights.
I see a light at the end of the tunnel now. All right. Thank you, guys. we are
Render the Darkness. Bye.
That was wrong.